says we need to get rid of farmers.
Maybe not too many in this group, but hey, we'll do a. Well, good morning, everybody. This hearing of the Committee on Agriculture will come to order. Good morning again, and welcome to the House Committee on Agriculture's Member Day hearing. And I appreciate my colleagues taking some time to share their priorities and their perspectives. For nearly 3 years, I've traveled members of this committee have traveled across the country to hear from farmers, ranchers, foresters, rural communities, processors, and everyday consumers. Now, these men and women have struggled with fractured supply chains, considerable input costs, relentless inflation, natural disasters, volatile markets, labor shortages, and each consistently worsened by ill-conceived, half-baked executive action. Now, this committee has a magnificent mandate to deliver a farm bill that protects and enhances the resources needed for producers to mitigate risks, increase our great nation's position on the world stage, and strengthen agriculture's return on investment, and most importantly, safeguard food and national security. And while the extension secured in the recent stopgap appropriations bill provides immediate certainty, it is not and should not be in lieu of a comprehensive and thoughtful bipartisan 5-year reauthorization of the Farm Bill. Now, we can craft a bipartisan farm bill that aligns with farm safety net with needs of producers, expand market access and trade promotion opportunities, strengthens program operations to demand transparency and accountability to the taxpayer, and reinforces not only the importance of helping our neighbors in need, but doing so without indiscriminate expansion of our nutrition safety net. However, significant headwinds exist. These range from the stark politics of the 118th Congress to the costs and funding constraints across the 12 titles of the Farm Bill. It will be virtually impossible to create a robust and resilient farm safety net without significant investment. Over the last 6 months, I've spent my time with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle articulating not only the needs in farm country, but how to fund the thousands of priorities shared through the committee's electronic portal and countless listening sessions. And I promoted a thoughtful framework of ideas, including the repurposing of the Inflation Reduction Act dollars, as well as a strengthening of Congress's Article 1 authority through a forward-thinking, thrifty food plan framework, among others. Taken in concert, these funding opportunities would not only fine-tune the farm safety net, but increase the Farm Bill's baseline through the reinvestment in bipartisan priorities across other titles, including conservation, research, and nutrition. These ideas have been applauded and demonized, but I will not relent and I will not fail our rural communities, many of whom have suffered insurmountable loss due to variables beyond their control. Our task is to build a responsive framework to meet the needs of American agriculture and its vast value chain. We do not need a transformational farm bill to do better. Strategic investment and good policy will make all the difference. This committee has a large jurisdiction, and I have always said we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Over the past year, we've worked closely with the House Committee on Financial Services to craft the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, or FIT 21, which is a comprehensive framework for the digital asset market. FIT 21 will offer certainty for market participants, address regulatory gaps, foster American innovation, and implement vital customer protections in the digital asset ecosystem. This collaborative effort resulted in FIT 21 being passed by both committees, Agriculture and Financial Services, in a bipartisan manner. Our work continues on this important policy priority as we pursue the bill's advancement in the House. And finally, as we consider additional authorities for the Commodities Future Trading Commission, we must also finally reauthorize the commission. As the ranking member and I have both agreed, this is another critical piece of work for the committee to undertake. With that, I welcome my colleagues to today's hearing, and I look forward to their testimony. I'd now like to welcome a distinguished member from North Carolina who's sitting in on behalf of our ranking member today, The gentleman from North Carolina, he will recognize for any opening remarks. Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Allow me to say what our ranking member, Mr. Scott, would say, and what we all want you to know, and that is we wish you the speediest recovery, and that we're praying for you. A person that often opens us up with prayer, leading us in prayer. We're going to lead prayer for you and your family. With that, I'm honored to be able to participate in today's member hearing. I look forward to hearing from our colleagues and their thoughts on the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is a critical piece of legislation that touches every congressional district in America. If you eat food, the Farm Bill matters to you. Interestingly, over 200 members of the House have never voted on a Farm Bill before. I hope we will work together in a bipartisan fashion to craft this bill. It is too important not to work together. We also must build on the success of the conservation programs funded by the Inflation Reduction Act, empowering farmers to adopt practices that are good for the environment and their bottom lines. The Farm Bill must fight food insecurity by ensuring every household in America, our children, our grandparents, our disabled, and veterans have access to food. It must expand opportunities for farmers in rural communities. It must help farmers to meet increasing renewable energy demands, which will help farmers diversify their income streams. And it must expand opportunities to all who wish to farm, especially new and beginning farmers and farmers of color, so that American agriculture can remain strong, vibrant, and innovative into the future. Together, we can achieve these goals with input of the witnesses who are here today. I look forward to hearing from our colleagues today, and Mr. Chair, thank you, and we yield back.
Ms. Davis, thank you so much. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so our colleagues may begin their testimony. I'd like to welcome our colleagues who have joined us today to provide testimony on issues important to their congressional districts. We have more than 20 members on the list to testify today, and each member will be recognized for 5 minutes. And I now recognize the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Newhouse, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, Mr. Davis, as well as all the members of the committee. As chairman of the Congressional Western Caucus, a member of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture, and maybe more importantly, as a third-generation farmer representing Central Washington, it's certainly a privilege to work with members of this distinguished committee. As we continue to address rural policy issues and support our farmers, our ranchers, and the agricultural industry, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today and want to highlight several important provisions as you develop the next Farm Bill. The Farm Bill, as you know, impacts all Americans, and this legislation must be carefully crafted to promote American agriculture, preserve our premier research institutions, improve forest health to prevent catastrophic wildfires, and provide a safety net to ensure the long-term success of America's agricultural industry. Trade continues to be critical for American farmers and ranchers, and our agricultural products are a key part of the global food supply. The Farm Bill must ensure that agricultural exports are prioritized in market promotion and that U.S. food aid continues to support American producers. It should reauthorize and consider expanding the Market Access Program, which is the main export promotion program that helps producers increase American agricultural products exports. Additionally, the Foreign Market Development Program, the Emerging Markets Program, and the Technical Assistance for Specialty Crops all play an important role in establishing new international markets for our products in foreign countries. My bill, the Agriculture Export Promotion Act of 2023, would expand and extend MAP and FMD programs to ensure that American farmers and ranchers have the support they need to grow their businesses. My district is home to a significant number of organic growers, and I'm concerned by the lack of urgency and collaboration from USDA in updating organic standards. Consumer trust in organics relies on strong and consistently updated voluntary standards that reflect the latest facts on environmental and ecological data, consumer demands, and innovative best practices. To address this issue, I, along with others on this committee, with overwhelming support from our growers across the country, introduced the Continuous Improvement and Accountability Act in organic standards. This legislation establishes a 5-year repeating process where USDA, its advisory board, and stakeholders work together to ensure evolving market data is included in modern organic practices. For farmers, land managers, and others not in the organic space, the ability to produce abundant food, feed, and fiber relies on access to safe and effective pesticides. However, some states have begun to regulate pesticides in a manner counter to the decades of scientific guidance from the EPA. The lack of certainty on EPA-approved science-based labels will erode access to current and future pesticides. It will threaten crops, grower incomes, conservation practices, public health, vital infrastructure, and ultimately raise food prices for families amidst record-high inflation. My friend, the distinguished representative from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson, introduced the Agricultural Label Uniformity Act to reaffirm federal pesticide label uniformity and prevent state and local governments from adopting inconsistent labeling or packaging that disrupts access to these vital tools. Growers and users need assurance that while states have authority to regulate pesticides within their jurisdiction, they cannot impose labeling or packaging requirements in addition or different from the scientific conclusions of EPA. In closing, Mr. Chairman, the pursuit of a healthy farm economy must be a top priority, and it is crucial to protect those that keep food on our shelves. I encourage urgency as you continue to develop the next Farm Bill, and I want to sincerely thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you, and I yield back.
Ms. Newhouse, thank you so much. Now please recognize the gentlelady from Minnesota, Congresswoman Fishbach, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Davis, for holding the member day hearing. I would like to thank Chairman Thompson very much for being engaged with everyone, from members of Congress to, most importantly, the farmers, as we look at this Farm Bill. As many of you know, rural communities across the country are struggling to retain population, much less attract future generations. This is often because these areas either lack or have outdated basic community infrastructure like hospitals, child care centers, and senior care centers. Unnecessary regulatory barriers create a disincentive to providing the necessary capital resources to build these important pieces of our communities. Earlier this year, I introduced the Investing in Rural America Act, which encourages investment in rural communities by restoring and codifying farm credits eligibility to finance community facilities in partnership with local lenders and USDA's Community Facilities Loan Program. I encourage the committee to include this important legislation that helps build strong rural communities in the upcoming Farm Bill. I'd also like to talk briefly about crop insurance. I know this committee strongly supports the current crop insurance program, but I believe there's an important issue and opportunity in the upcoming Farm Bill to address. We spend billions on disaster assistance, not offset, outside the Farm Bill to compensate farmers for disasters. Congress has relied on inefficient, deficit-inducing ad hoc assistance for both insurable and uninsurable disaster events. These programs are created and administered after the fact with often confusing and burdensome programs and leave producers waiting for assistance for years in some cases, while also driving up costs to the taxpayer. Look no further than the most recent iteration of ERP to see the flaws in the current system. Crop insurance has proven to be a bedrock risk management tool, and while I appreciate the fiscal constraints on this committee, I firmly believe an opportunity exists to build on the program's success by making higher coverage levels more affordable to producers across the country. This will help alleviate the need for ad hoc assistance programs, saving money while strengthening this important risk management tool. In many ways, this was the reason for the creation of the federal crop insurance program. Building these resources into the crop insurance program will help provide timely assistance, require producers' skin in the game, and provide the consistency and certainty that the ad hoc system currently lacks. Finally, Mr. Chairman, Western Minnesota produces a third of the country's sugar beets, more than any other district or state in the country. Farmers in my district rely on the sugar program to provide nature's sweetener to our tables. The industry contributes more than $23 billion each year for the U.S. economy, according to the Sugar Alliance. It is a job creator and a community driver at zero cost to taxpayers. I strongly urge the committee to reject misguided and harmful attacks on this program and protect it for the next generation of sugar beet and cane farmers across the country and especially in Western Minnesota. Mr. Chair, I thank you and yield back my time.
Well, Congresswoman Sichwalk, thank you so much for your testimony representing your district. Now, please recognize the General Lady from Puerto Rico, Congresswoman Gonzalez Colon, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm so happy to be here, and I wish you a fast recovery. You're a true friend of the island. I want to say thank you for visiting our farmers and our people on the island during this semester, discussing actually the Farm Bill. It was a great opportunity for all the local stakeholders to have you there. I thank you, and I thank Mr. Davis for having this opportunity to testify today. As you know, Puerto Rico is not included in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. Instead, the island offers federal nutrition assistance to low-income families through the Nutrition Assistance Program, or NAP, which is a capped block grant program funded every year by Congress. With NAP, U.S. citizens living in Puerto Rico receive fewer benefits compared to their SNAP counterparts. We also depend on Congress to allocate additional emergency funds through supplemental legislation in the event of a natural disaster or national emergencies. And this challenges the response on the ground and produces uncertainty as state agencies, officials, and island residents are unaware of what, if any, disaster resources will be available when needed. SNAP, on the other hand, will ensure residents in Puerto Rico, like those living in the 50 states, Washington, D.C., the U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam, are properly supported when in need of assistance to cover the dietary expenses. SNAP also has built-in tools to bolster the economy, like work requirements. Some estimates show that if Puerto Rico were included in SNAP and therefore in compliance with work requirements, approximately 250,000 residents will be brought into the workforce. There's ample support from both the public and private sectors on the island for the transition from NAP to SNAP. It is a bipartisan issue. And there is potential impact of this change on agricultural communities across the country. Puerto Rico imports close to 80% of the food it consumes, and most of those items come from the states. Some of the imports categories include poultry, meat, dairy, cereals, among others, with the mainland being the #1 supplier and seller. I introduced legislation that will help us achieve participation in SNAP, H.R. 253, the Puerto Rico Nutrition Assistance Fairness Act, and this bill, which is bipartisan, bicameral, and supported by all stakeholders on the island, supports the transition and gives us a time frame for both Puerto Rico and the U.S. Department of Agriculture to undertake this change in full compliance with programmatic requirements under SNAP. Puerto Rico has been excluded from NAP since the 1980s. And NAP is one of the main programs the island residents turn to when there is an economic downturn or emergency impacting their work hours and their livelihood, and yet they are shortchanged compared to the SNAP counterparts. That's the reason I urge this committee to take the opportunity on the Farm Bill to address this issue and support a real nutrition assistance and security for Puerto Rico. Lastly, I would like to highlight some other priorities that will foster greater research opportunities for some of our specialty crops, which are bananas, plantains, cacao, and mangoes. These are staple items in our diet and our agriculture economy. I have introduced legislation that will add these crops as priority research areas for the Department of Agriculture. There are H.R. 1455, the Plantain and Banana Plant Health Initiative Act, the H.R. 154, the Cacao Tree Health Initiative Act, the H.R. 3856, the Mango Plant Health Initiative Act. Including these bills within the upcoming Farm Bill will have a remarkably positive impact on our abilities to conduct research of these crops, mainly the pest and plant diseases that threaten them and how to mitigate this. And I would like to conclude by my remarks by thanking you, Chairman Thompson, for your time, as well as your dedicated staff who has been working alongside my staff for many years on all these issues, as well as Mr. McGovern. I want to say thank you, and I yield back.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. Thanks for being a great voice for your constituents in Puerto Rico. Now, pleased to recognize our colleague, a gentleman from Guam, Congressman Moylan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing and allowing me the chance to speak about issues of critical importance to my district of Guam. I've come before the committee today to discuss 3 of my amendments that I will be offering to the Farm Bill. The first of these amendments will designate the Guam Office of USDA Rural Development as a state-level office, giving them the ability to bring decision-making on the ground in Guam, as opposed to the status quo where final decisions are made 3,000 miles away in Hawaii. In speaking with my constituents, I've heard time and again their concerns with decision-making regarding Guam businesses and government were being made in Hawaii. This is unacceptable outcome for my constituents. They should not have to call 808 numbers, whether for their health care or to get help applying for federal grants for low-interest loans. The second amendment I would like to discuss would extend Section 7119 of the 2018 Farm Bill. This section authorizes grants to support agriculture and food science programs at insular colleges, such as the University of Guam in my district. This money helps our local institutions for higher education pay to acquire, alter, or repair facilities and equipment necessary for conducting agriculture research. My amendment would also pull $40 million from the unallocated money within USDA originally from the IRA. This will double the availability of money over the next 5 years, providing essential boosts to help insular colleges research the agricultural field in a tropical climate. The third and final amendment I would like to bring to your attention would allow for the creation of an advisory committee to the Secretary of Agriculture focused on issues relating to U.S. territories and freely associated states. This would ensure when USDA is promulgating rules or considering changes in an agency policy that they are consulting representatives of the territories. When I'm home in district, I hear stories of constituents forced to join agency calls at all hours of the night because they do not take into consideration their Pacific stakeholders. This advisory committee will ensure that does not happen going forward. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for allowing me the chance to come before you and speak about my priorities for the upcoming Farm Bill. I'm always happy to work with committee staff or other members on these issues. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman. Thanks for representing your constituents in Guam and on the important issues related to agriculture. Much appreciated. Now I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from Arkansas, the chairman of the Natural Resource Committee, Mr. Westerman, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Thompson and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in today's important Agriculture Committee Member Day hearing. I do appreciate the work that you're doing to support farmers, foresters, ranchers in rural America, and also appreciate your staff, Parrish and Aaron, for helping accommodate our schedule since we have a markup beginning soon in natural resources. See, Mr. Crawford has left, but he knows as well that agriculture and Arkansas are synonymous. My home state has a wide array of agricultural commodities, and agriculture claims first place in the natural state's largest industry. While each segment of the industry is important to feed, fuel, and clothe Americans across the country, I'd like to talk to you about one specific sector. You can probably guess what that is. I'm proud to hold the title of the only licensed forester in Congress, and I enjoy talking about forestry and trees at any and every opportunity. I appreciate the work that the Agriculture Committee has done to address forestry issues, promote active forest management, and improve the health of our forest. As your committee continues the important work of crafting the Farm Bill, I want to share a few priorities with you that, in my opinion, will ensure the strongest and most comprehensive forestry title in the Farm Bill that is possible. I'm passionate about conserving our trees, as I know many of you are, and particularly when it comes to national treasures like our giant sequoias. As you know, nearly 1/5 of all giant sequoias were destroyed in the catastrophic wildfires in 2020 and 2021. That has prompted me to work closely with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to introduce the Save Our Sequoias Act. SOS provides a bipartisan and comprehensive response to address imminent threats facing the iconic giant sequoias. I believe this bill is bigger than just sequoias. Rather, it provides a framework for forest management bills that should come down the road. It's not every day that you see such powerful support on both sides of the aisle for a bill here in D.C., and I'm proud to be leading this legislation alongside my California colleagues. I'd like to highlight another important tool to improve forest health, and that's biochar. For those who may not be familiar with biochar, it's made by burning feedstock like low-value wood products or chicken litter or crop residues in the absence of oxygen. This process is known as pyrolysis. What's special about biochar, it is essentially a pure form of carbon. Biochar can sequester carbon for hundreds or even thousands of years. This ancient technique may be the solution to solving one of our most modern problems. Biochar can serve as a new market that can make removing low-value excess materials from our federal forest economical. Not only would this improve forest health, but biochar could then be used as a soil additive to retain moisture and nutrients and neutralize acidity. I plan to reintroduce bipartisan legislation shortly that will unleash this emerging technology to help it reach its full environmental and agricultural potential. This bill directs our federal land management agencies to establish biochar demonstration projects in each Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management region across the nation. I'm excited about the potential that biochar has to incentivize forest management and improve forest health, and I urge you to incorporate it into the Farm Bill. Another issue that I would like to see addressed in the Farm Bill is reversing the cottonwood decision. Cottonwood presents unnecessary, unworkable, and costly bureaucratic hurdles that empower environmental litigants with additional weapons to delay or cancel land and forest management projects. We need to provide a full, permanent fix to the misguided 2015 Cottonwood decision that has significantly hampered responsible forest management in many of our western states. We partially fixed this issue in the 2018 Omnibus. However, that fix expired this March. I urge the Ag Committee to include the Forest Information Reform Act in the upcoming Farm Bill, which would resolve this issue fully and permanently. Another critical tool in confronting our forest health and wildlife crisis is the Good Neighbor Authority. While state GNA projects have flourished, tribes and counties have not been given the same authority that states have to retain timber receipts for use on additional conservation and restoration work. This removes a significant incentive to partner on these projects. My colleagues on the Natural Resources Committee, led by Representative Fulcher, introduced legislation, the Treating Tribes and Counties as Good Neighbor Authority Act, is a bipartisan effort that allows tribes and counties to participate in the Good Neighbor Authority program. This passed the House, and I urge you to prioritize it in the upcoming Farm Bill reauthorization. There's more forestry issues than we have time to discuss today, but again, I thank you for all the work the committee does and appreciate the the openness and the ability that we've had to work together on these important issues. Now yield back.
Well, Chairman, thank you very much, and obviously we have your written comments and ongoing conversations as well. Thank you for your leadership with Forestry. Mr. Scott from Georgia indicated he has a comment or question, and so I'll yield to him.
I just wanted to thank you for bringing up the forestry. Our forest land is extremely important to the environment. It protects our watersheds. It's our wildlife habitat. And in my state, in Georgia, thousands of acres of forest land are being cut down to put solar panels up. And land that would be worth, just as an example, approximately $5,000 an acre, the solar subsidies are so high that those companies in some cases are paying $10,000 an acre for that land. And then they clear cut it, all of it. The pines, the hardwoods, they destroy all of the wildlife habitat. And then they come in with heavy equipment and they level the land, changing the watersheds. It's a ridiculous waste of taxpayer money to give subsidies to destroy our forest land. Whether you're for solar panels or not, they shouldn't be going on our forest land where they're destroying the wildlife habitat. And I'm just wondering if you're seeing the same impact of subsidies in Arkansas, where these companies are coming in and paying as much as twice what the fair market value of the land is worth to then clear cut it, destroy the wildlife habitat, change the watersheds, and put solar panels up.
Yeah, well, that's an important issue, and I've got a personal story about that. I live in the same area where I grew up and close to the high school I graduated from. A few years ago, I noticed that a big mature forest that was, it was private land, somebody had apparently sold that. They clear cut it, and I'm talking, big pine trees like this on the side of a hill. Mm-hmm. And it was on the main road, and I thought, okay, they're putting some kind of housing development in or something. And as time passed, and I would drive by, I saw them put a fence around it and start putting solar panels in. I did a little research on it, and it was a partnership with the local school to reduce their energy cost. But it was, they clear cut a mature forest, put these solar panels out, and then, to keep the weeds down, there's nothing green inside that fence. And it was all done in the name of protecting the environment and lowering the cost for the school, which the only way it lowered the cost was because there were subsidies involved.
Mm-hmm. I think this is something that I'm baffled that we can't, in a bipartisan manner, stop the destruction of the forest land with subsidies. It's not a square deal for the environment.
Yeah, if we want to put solar panels in, let's not clear cut forests to put solar panels in.
I agree with you, and I appreciate you being here to talk about the value of our forest land to the environment and our wildlife habitat.
All right, well, thank you, Ms. Westerman. Now, please recognize a fellow colleague from the Keystone State, Mr. Smucker, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and I'll share in the comments of Mr. Davis that you will be in our prayers, and we wish you good health and speedy recovery.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you first to the committee for all of the work that you're doing to promote agriculture and on the Farm Bill. Your committee staff, the chairman, have worked with us very well on many issues that are important to the district that I represent and important to Pennsylvania. We are, crop insurance and other programs, the milk program, are very important in my region to help to ensure that our farmers are continuing to feed America, and I know the chairman knows this very, very well. We're also in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and so some of the conservation programs and some ideas to improve the efficiency of the dollars for farmers in my area who are very interested in implementing best practices. Those are important as well, and I appreciate all the conversations that we've had about how to improve those those programs. I do want to say in the counties that I represent, Lancaster and York counties, the 11th district, we are proportionally a significant part of the agricultural products in Pennsylvania, nearly 20% in the Lancaster County alone. We have dairy, poultry, hog farmers, as well as grain, fruit, and vegetable growers, a lot of different products. But what I want to talk just briefly with the committee about today is the importance of encouraging nutritional food options for those who are facing food insecurity. And I want to do it in the context not only of the importance of healthy, ensuring that these programs provide for folks' health, but in the context of a committee or a hearing that we held recently in the Joint Economic Committee, in which I'm a member, that looked at the economic impact of diabetes. And we all know about the growing health care costs here in the U.S. and the impact that has on our entire budget and on our financial trajectory. At that hearing back in July, the total estimated cost of diabetes in the U.S. is $413 billion in direct and indirect costs. Individuals with diabetes account for 1 in 4 of every dollar spent on health care costs, on health care in the U.S. And we also know that nutritional eating is an important component to prevent diabetes, and that a higher intake of fruits and green leafy vegetables reduces the risk of type 2 diabetes in consumers quite significantly. So just 2 programs I'd like to mention this morning. And first is the WIC program. Now, I understand that's not in the Farm Bill and may not even necessarily be in the jurisdiction of the Ag Committee, but I do want to just mention it as a really important program that provides access and incentivizes nutritious food options for individuals who are accessing these programs. I can tell you firsthand, I've talked with individuals in my district who have accessed WIC and have talked about how much it's impacted their lives as they change their food purchases and consumption based on the foods that were available through that program. In Pennsylvania, there are more than 10,000 individuals who benefit from the WIC program. And food prices have skyrocketed, we know that. And so we're in danger of people losing access to the WIC program just because of the cost of food prices. The second program I'd like to mention, which is directly within the agriculture program, is GusNIP, which is I think, positive example of a way that the federal government can incentivize these healthy dietary patterns. What GusNIP does is work with local producers, expanding the universe for eligible grant applications who help ensure that GusNIP programs provide the nutritious options, but also are spent locally on local farms, keeping the money within local communities. Studies have shown that individuals who participate in these kind of programs do indeed eat more fruits and vegetables than they would otherwise, and they maintain these habits after participating in the program. So again, I'm a proud co-sponsor of the GusNIP Expansion Act of 2023, introduced by Representative Rick Crawford, who's a member of the committee, of course. But I'd just like to urge the committee to increase the dollars spent on GusNIP, and they can continue to consider incentivizing and making available nutritious food options for those who are accessing these programs to address their food insecurity. So thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to testify here today.
Well, Lori, thank you for testifying on behalf of your constituents. Certainly, the nutrition title is very important to this committee, and you're right, the WIC program is outside our it is implemented by the Department of Agriculture, but strange things happen in terms of jurisdiction. As someone who, my wife and I, when she was pregnant with our first son, who were WIC eligible and really utilized that program, I appreciate your kind words about the WIC program. That needs to be addressed. That's more in the education and workforce area. And I just appreciate your support and your enthusiasm for these nutrition programs. Mr. McGovern?
No, I just want to say I appreciate your testimony, and I'm a big supporter of GovSNP, which is within the jurisdiction
Right.
of this committee, and it's an incredibly successful program. And we need to have a greater focus on nutrition. Quite frankly, not only in the agriculture bill, but in a lot of the bills that deal with health care in general. But thank you for your testimony.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. McGovern. Thank you, Mr. Smucker. Now I'm pleased to recognize the esteemed gentleman from Georgia, a former member of this, an esteemed member of this committee in the past, Mr. Rick Allen, for 5 minutes.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be back, and please know that we offer our prayers to your full recovery as well. I want to thank the committee for allowing me to provide this testimony and to highlight agricultural issues that are critical to the 12th Congressional District of Georgia. Agriculture is our state's #1 industry and plays a key role in the economy of my home district in Georgia as a whole. Having served on the House Agriculture Committee for 8 years, I appreciate the hard work that goes into writing the Farm Bill, which provides certainty for our farmers by authorizing farm policy for at least a 5-year cycle. I was proud of the work that we did on the 2018 Farm Bill, like strengthening the farm safety net, expanding access to rural broadband, improving program integrity and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and protecting and strengthening sugar policy, and I believe we must continue to prioritize these policies. I remain committed to ensuring that America produces the safest, most abundant, most affordable food supply in the world as we continue to our work on reauthorizing the next Farm Bill. There are concerns, and the #1 concern that I've heard from Georgia farmers these past 2 years is declining margins. We are in uncharted waters. They are in the fight for their lives to survive this crisis, primarily caused by inflation, supply chain disruptions, rising input costs, combined with depressed commodity prices. In fact, we haven't seen anything like this since 1982. Food security is national security. We have lived to regret our overdependence on foreign countries for our manufactured goods. If we do not act to properly support our farmers, this nation could become dependent on global competitors for food, which is a national security risk. I have continuously heard from my farmers that it is crucial we increase reference prices for Title I commodities in the next Farm Bill. It is also imperative that we strengthen risk management options such as agricultural risk protection, or ARC, and price loss coverages, called PLC. Specifically, I support allowing producers who are enrolled in ARC or PLC programs to be able to purchase Stacked Home Protection Plan or STAX coverage. In addition, I urge the committee to consider a provision to ensure our farmers have coverage should supply chain issues cause problems with planting or harvesting, like a requirement for including lack of agronomic inputs as covered under USDA's multi-peril crop insurance policies. Many farmers in my area of the country experience financial hardships when the unusual supply chain disruptions were not accounted for by insurance policies. Regarding market prices, I encourage the committee to address failing market prices due to seasonal inputs. Many farmers are forced to compete with foreign subsidized imports, causing a large decrease in the market value of many seasonally grown commodities. Congressman Austin Scott, my colleague, introduced H.R. 4580, the American Seasonal and Perishable Crop Support Act, during the 117th Congress. I ask that similar language to this bill be included in the next Farm Bill to protect our growers against foreign markets. Next, we need to address our workforce issues. Programs such as H-2A are critical for many farmers in my district, but they need reforms to become more widely used by American farmers. Included in the House-passed H.R. 2, the Secure Border Act, were provisions to conduct an agriculture workforce study. I ask that the committee fight for the inclusion of Sections 814, 815, and 816 of H.R. 2 in any immigration package considered by the House in the coming months. When it comes to our domestic labor policies, as a small businessman, I know the employment challenges that we face today. A top issue I hear throughout my district is the need for workers. We must discuss the income and employment requirements under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and let's get Americans back to work. I have one final point I'd like to raise to the committee's attention. State-led agencies for pesticides, who often fly over the radar, work hard every day to keep homes, businesses, and school pest and rodent-free. 46 states, including Georgia, have one lead agency for pesticides. We need to support and codify that each state should have a robust state-led pesticide agency in the next Farm Bill. This is an initiative I have continued to build support for over the last two Congresses, and I've seen firsthand how well the Georgia Department of Agriculture, alongside key Georgia industries, keep our public safe. Having multiple regulatory bodies in a state does not work and is not effective for protecting public health and the environment. To wrap up, as we continue to process the writing of the next Farm Bill, I hope to work closely with the House Agriculture Committee on these issues that are vitally important to Georgia's 12th District. Thank you again to the committee for this opportunity to provide input, and I welcome the chance to further discuss these topics as we ensure our nation's food supply remains secure and sustainable. And with that, sir, I yield back.
Mr. Allen, thanks so much for representing your constituents and the number one industry of agriculture. I'm now pleased to recognize the gentleman from Illinois, 6th Congressional District, Mr. Kasten, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Thompson, and Ranking Member Scott, and the other members who are here for holding this hearing today and giving me the opportunity to testify. Before starting with my prepared remarks, I just want to join my colleagues in underscoring the importance that the next Farm Bill preserves the nearly $20 billion provided in the Inflation Reduction Act for USDA conservation programs. But I'm here to talk about my bill and to encourage you to include the Conservation Opportunity and Voluntary Environment Resilience Program, or COVER Act. Several of the folks before me here, I'm pleased to say, have spoken about the benefits of cover crops. Cover crops, in a word, help farmers to mitigate risk. There was a 2023 study that found that higher cover crop adoption led to lower levels of crop insurance losses. The best quantification I've seen says that a 1% increase in cover crops leads to $40 million in savings from reduced planting-related indemnities. And this is only getting worse with climate change. It's already made the federal crop insurance program more expensive and challenging to manage due to drought, due to rain, due to extreme weather events. Between 1995 and 2020, crop insurance payments have risen by more than 400% for drought-related losses, nearly 300% for rain and flooding-related losses. And the USDA has estimated that without mitigating actions, the cost of the federal crop insurance program could increase by up to 37%. Cover crops are a way to protect farmers from that risk, putting more roots in the soil. It holds on to the topsoil, prevents erosion, improves soil health, adds more nutrients to the soil, increases biodiversity. But it is also a way for farmers to play a role in addressing the climate crisis by planting crops that move carbon from the atmosphere and into the soils. The idea of the cover crop program is to build on the successful federal pandemic cover crop program by incentivizing the planting of cover crops on a voluntary basis by providing farmers with $5 per acre of crop insurance discounts for every acre that they plant into cover crops. If the states are laboratories of democracy, this is also a great example of building on what the states have already done. In 2018, Iowa implemented a very similar program, was hugely successful, oversubsidized. My own state copied it in Illinois. It since has been copied in Indiana and Wisconsin. And the fact that it's been oversubscribed and at the federal level, that pandemic program, is a nice sign, A, that farmers want this, that they want to do it, and that the $5 level, low as that is relative to other farmer costs, is sufficient to drive uptake. Recent poll found that more than 2/3 of crop farmers support making the USDA cover program a permanent option in the crop insurance program. It's an incentive-based program. It is fully voluntary. If farmers don't think this is the right thing for their piece of land, that's fine. And it would also authorize the USDA to evaluate how additional premium subsidies could be offered for other soil health practices that reduce risk and comply with the goals of the federal crop insurance program. I'd frame this as sort of like a safe driver discount. If a farmer chooses to reduce their risk by planting cover crops, they get rewarded for pursuing low-risk behavior. It would also do this at significant value. We have intentionally structured this to not affect the actuarial aspects of the crop insurance program. The discount is provided outside of the underwriting and premium cost calculation process, so it doesn't change the cost of the policy for farmers or service providers, just offers an extra discount that is applied after the initial cost calculation. The act, as we've introduced it, has been endorsed by over 130 local, state, and national organizations who support the legislation. I'm proud that it is both bipartisan and bicameral, co-led in this Congress by Congresswoman Slotkin of Michigan and my friend Mr. Bost of this committee from Illinois, and Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. I hope you'll consider including this in the 2023 Farm Bill. I thank you again, Chair Thompson, and all the members of the House Agricultural Committee for allowing me to testify today. And I yield back.
Ms. Gaston, thank you for testifying today. Thanks for representing your constituents. We know those conservation programs, cover crops, and everything else obviously work best, as you mentioned, when they're voluntary and locally led, and they're very, very, very effective. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Obviously, I know there's areas I have visited. In certain areas where it's so dry that if you put a cover crop in, it'll suck every bit of moisture out of the ground. You're not going to be able to raise your cash crop, obviously. But that's why making anything that we do voluntary and locally led just makes sense. But thank you for testifying today. Appreciate you. And now please recognize a fellow colleague from the Keystone State. Quite frankly, I think I had dinner about 400 feet from his office in Newtown, Pennsylvania on Sunday night, where my son lives. And Mr. Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, please recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, and thank you for opening up the Agricultural Committee to the membership today to discuss our legislative initiatives. Mr. Chairman, there are 3 areas that I wanted to talk to the committee about today: animal welfare, conservation, and nutrition. Starting with animal welfare, all 3 of which, by the way, have legislative initiatives that I'm actively pursuing. Recent findings of neglect and abuse in puppy mills across our country have stained the reputation of that entire industry across the country, negatively impacting, by the way, law-abiding breeders. And to address these bad actors in the commercial breeding industry, I was proud to introduce with a number of members of this committee H.R. 1624, the Puppy Protection Act. This is the reasonable protection of animals, Chairman Thompson, as I know you agree with, is very, very essential. It's a role of the federal government. We have the responsibility to raise this. The currently what we believe to be insufficient standards of care for commercially bred puppies and dogs. And by amending the Animal Welfare Acts and cleaning up facilities that maintain blatantly inhumane conditions, this bipartisan bill will meet that obligation. And the increased cases of dogs and puppies being kept in cruel and inadequate facilities across the country, in my belief, sir, represents a failure of the federal government to administer its very own regulations. And by strengthening the common sense standards for large commercially licensed breeders, Congress can assure that the USDA inspectors are doing the job that's expected of them rather than placing the burden on our local law enforcement officers in our hometown communities. This bill has received broad support. As you know, we have over 216 co-sponsors since it was introduced, including 21 members of this committee. And I would also like to thank our co-leads, Representatives McGovern, Rushenthaler, and Panetta, for partnering with me on this issue. And to reiterate the importance of this legislation, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to insert into the record a statement from Sheriff Custer from our home state of Pennsylvania, who's a member of the National Sheriff's Association Board of Directors in support of this legislation.
Sure, without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving on to another issue being addressed by this committee that I'd like to highlight is nutrition. One topic of concern is combating hunger amongst seniors and adults with disabilities. Food insecurity is persisting amid this post-pandemic recovery, and it is affecting our most vulnerable communities, which is why I introduced H.R. 4706, the Senior Nutrition Task Force Act. Mr. Chairman, this bipartisan, bicameral legislation will establish a working group to combat malnutrition amongst senior citizens and disabled adults. And I urge my colleagues to continue to support this initiative that will modernize our bureaucracy to support these vulnerable groups. In another effort to modernize nutrition programs, I was proud to join my colleagues in introducing H.R. 3519, the Hot Food Act of 2023. Mr. Chairman, this bipartisan legislation would amend SNAP by removing an outdated prohibition which prevents recipients from purchasing hot foods with nutritional benefits, and by allowing SNAP consumers to purchase nutritious hot food items, such as rotisserie chickens. There will be greater flexibility for our families on this program, which is a very, very important program that this committee has supported. And I look forward to working with my colleagues and having them join us to streamline this program to address the unnecessary red tape which restricts business owners, program administrators, and SNAP beneficiaries themselves. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, to address the issue of conservation. My hometowns of Bucks and Montgomery counties in Pennsylvania have a strong tradition of conservation practices, and I encourage this committee to embrace policies that preserve our lands, particularly H.R. 3174, the Invasive Species Prevention and Forest Restoration Act. Chairman Thompson, this bipartisan legislation would expand access to the USDA and other programs to eradicate and contain pests that are damaging our environment, particularly our farmers. Most notably, the increased prevalence of spotted lanternflies throughout our home state of Pennsylvania has been devastating to crops and very damaging to our family farmers. As a Congress, we must take serious action to protect our farms and our farmers and our crops against invasive species and preserve our lands for the next generation. Chairman Thompson, thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration of these matters, and I yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for being here and representing his constituents, and what I know is Pennsylvania's #1 industry for sure is agriculture. So thank you. Now please recognize the gentleman for Virginia, 8th Congressional District, Congressman Byer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much, and thank you, Chairman Thompson, and Acting Ranking Member Budzinski for holding this hearing. It's really a wonderful to be able to talk about key priorities. Mr. Chairman, America was born on a farm in Virginia. All of our founding fathers and mothers were farmers, including George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. So I want to, number one, express my concern about the rumors I've heard about using the money provided by the Inflation Reduction Act for the USDA conservation programs as a pay-for this farm bill. And frankly, I just feel this will be stealing money from Virginia farmers, from America's farmers, that they've already anticipated receiving. $275 million just in Virginia. These are planned investments, and as you know, the worst thing for business people is to have uncertainty, to make plans around something and then have it taken away. USDA received requests for way more money than the Inflation Reduction Act made available, and this just shows how much farmers really want the support. So I think the Farm Bill should be looking at addressing future needs rather than undoing the past. Second, I'm supporting in incorporating the Agricultural Resilience Act authored by Congresswoman Shelley Pingree in your Farm Bill. Particularly, my constituents and I are excited about the provisions in her bill to promote innovative practices in soil health, nutrient management, and perennial agriculture. Historians have made the connection between soil health, the deterioration of soil health, and the rise of slavery and eventually the Civil War. And we should use the Farm Bill to direct the USDA to be a better partner on farmers practicing perennial agriculture and other good soil health practices. Nature is perennial and polycultural, but agriculture has always been annual and monocultural, so let's learn from nature. And the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas has done some remarkable work. Number three, I'd like to speak to a proposal I'm developing for a farmer-led energy future. Margins, as we know, are very tight for farmers, but not all farmers have the bandwidth, the inclination, or support to incorporate additional income streams that could be available to them. My farmer-led energy future proposal puts rural communities in the driver's seat so the farmers themselves can look at incorporating potential additional income streams of renewable energy when it makes sense to them and it allows them to set the terms. And this can be done in a way so that prime farmland isn't lost, perhaps we hope even forests are not lost, and supports rather than competes with a farming future. And Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, my final point is that I believe the Farm Bill is an opportunity for the USDA to improve their assistance and recognition of farmers and ranchers who have voluntarily conserved their lands as wildlife corridors. I've been a champion of wildlife corridors over the last decade. In my first term, I introduced the bipartisan Wildlife Corridors Conservation Act. Wildlife corridors are critical for plant and animal populations, for their natural dispersion and migration, and for when they need to respond to changing environmental conditions, which are happening all over the world. With much of our country privately owned, our private landowners play an important role in efforts to conserve and protect habitat connectivity and wildlife corridors. USDA just announced that they're expanding the Migratory Big Game Initiative pilot program to Idaho and Montana because it's worked so successfully in Wyoming. These wildlife corridors initiatives work. So in the next Farm Bill, we hope to direct the USDA to celebrate wildlife corridors and support voluntary landowner actions in the context of larger landscapes and waterscapes. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, and I yield back.
Well, Mr. Byer, thank you so much for being here and appearing before the committee and presenting those thoughts and ideas. Much appreciated. Now we're going to go from Virginia to Arizona, the Arizona 6th Congressional District, and pleased to recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Siscomani, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, and the House Agriculture Committee members as well for allowing me to testify before you today. And Chairman Thompson, I actually want to just take a quick moment to say that Laura and I are praying for you and keeping your family in our thoughts and our prayers as you begin your brave and soon victorious battle for your health, sir. We're praying for you. I come before the committee today to testify in support of my bipartisan bill, H.R. 6497, the Healthy Watersheds, Healthy Communities Act of 2023, and more broadly, to advocate for more drought mitigation assistance in the upcoming Farm Bill. I represent several rural areas with a large agricultural presence in southern Arizona, including Cochise, Graham, Greenlee, and Pinal counties. Arizona farmers provide Americans with lettuce, nuts, cotton, and other essential goods year-round thanks to our unique climate. Our farmers and ranchers have repeatedly proven themselves to be resilient despite the uncertainties they face due to the unpredictable nature of the water resources and wildfires in the region. They lead the way in conservation efforts and consistently supply our communities with the food that we need, but their resiliency depends on our watershed's resiliency. As we continue to face historic drought in the West, more communities are turning to the Natural Resources Conservation Services Watershed and Flood Preservation Operation Program, also known as PL 566 program, to find solutions to the various issues accompanying extreme drought. While the PL 566 program has had great success in assisting agricultural communities in addressing natural disasters, only about 21% of the program's funds have actually gone to Western states. The Healthy Watersheds, Healthy Communities Act of 2023, which I introduced with some of my fellow Western colleagues, Representative Hagman, Flood, Pedersen, Neguse, and Caravelle, aims to provide parity for Western states by making some common sense modifications to the PL 566 program. Specifically, our bill would encourage Western participation in this program by making drought resilience an explicit purpose of the program, consolidating the planning of one of or more of sub-watersheds, and including irrigation districts as local organizations, making them clearly eligible for assistance under the law. Further, the bill would pull back bureaucratic red tape and empower local water experts by giving state conservationists more discretion to oversee watershed plans, simplifying planning requirements for natural infrastructure projects components, and encouraging interagency coordination. In short, the Healthy Watersheds, Healthy Communities Act will make PL 566 program will make it work for the West. As the communities continue to work on reauthorizing the Farm Bill, I urge the inclusion of provisions from the Healthy Watersheds, Healthy Communities Act. Additionally, Mr. Chairman, I want to underscore how important programs in the conservation title of the Farm Bill are for my constituents. Programs like the Environmental Quality Incentive Program and Conservation Stewardship Program and the Conservation Reserve Program all serve as a critical resource for agriculturists looking to be good stewards of the most precious natural resource, water. In the past few months, I have visited agricultural stakeholders from all walks of life in southeastern Arizona. From these visits, I have become keenly aware of what's at stake, the next generation of agricultural producers. At a farmers listening session I held a few months ago, I heard from Sarah Ogilvie, a pistachio entrepreneur and rancher in Benson, Arizona. Sarah is passionate about agriculture and traces her passion back to her childhood as her family's small ranch. Like many Arizona farmers, she was taught the value of water from a very young age. Well, Sarah looks fondly on her agricultural roots and believes the agriculture industry is, in her words, not just a job, but a way of life. She was moved to tears when discussing the future challenges she and her family will have to face as the drought persists. Sarah and her husband, Andrew, are still farming and ranching despite these challenges, so they can teach their children the importance of caring for the land and animals. Still, she admits it is difficult to remain hopeful about the future of agriculture in Arizona. To keep our food supply chain stable, America needs to retain young agriculturists like Sarah and Andrew. Only 9% of farmers are under the age of 35, with the average age being 58. As we discuss industry resiliency, we must remember the human element that's behind it all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for hearing my testimony, and I look forward to working with you all to ensure this farm bill works for the West. Thank you, sir.
Well, Congressman, thank you so much for the time that you spend with your constituents that really provide us with food, and your passion for water, which is life-giving, right? And really important issues. Appreciate your leadership in that area. So thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Now, please recognize the gentlelady from Iowa, Iowa's 2nd Congressional District, Congresswoman Henson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We grow and raise a few things in Iowa, and so I'm very pleased to be before the committee, and thank you to the members for listening to our testimony to highlight some of the most important issues facing America's farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. So as we prepare to reauthorize the Farm Bill, I encourage the committee to improve the USDA's existing slate of conservation programs to really address the current needs of American agriculture. Conservation practices can improve resiliency against stressors like drought while still preserving soil and water quality. I've recently introduced several bipartisan pieces of legislation to improve USDA's conservation programs. One I'd like to highlight right away here is my Flood Resiliency and Land Stewardship Act. This would elevate flooding and drought as natural resource concerns under the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. This bill will ensure that flooding and drought remain a long-term focus of the program to improve American farmers' ability to withstand environmental threats. And I'd also encourage the committee to consider efforts to address regional conservation issues like those that affect the driftless region of the upper Mississippi River. The driftless region's unique topography and position on the upper Mississippi leaves it exposed to erosion and water quality issues. Building on the USDA's previous efforts through the Driftless Landscape Conservation Initiative, DALSI, will ensure that my constituents in that region have access to voluntary tools to preserve their natural resources. Empowering our farmers and landowners who know and love the driftless area with conservation tools rather than one-size-fits-all mandates from the government is the best strategy. Technology is another really important tool for farmers to manage pests and make more efficient use of inputs. Unfortunately, many precision agriculture tools can be cost prohibitive, especially for small farmers. So my bipartisan Precise Act modifies existing USDA programs like EQIP, CSP, and the Conservation Loan Program to help our small farmers access these technologies. I'd also encourage the committee to advance a farm bill that preserves market access for American producers. The Supreme Court's recent decision to uphold California's animal housing mandate, known as Proposition 12, has the potential to disrupt the free movement of goods across state lines, and it poses a serious threat to small family farms across the country. A 2023 study from Dr. Barry Goodwin of North Carolina State University found that this legislation, Prop 12, would cost farmers between $3,600 and $4,000 per sow for new construction in order to comply with California's arbitrary standards. And this just isn't a number. These mandates are already having a real-world impact on my constituents. Since the Supreme Court's decision, I've traveled throughout my state hearing from farmers who are concerned about mandates like Prop 12 and Massachusetts Question 3, which goes even further. Melissa, a farmer from my district, says Prop 12 and legislation like it creates uncertainty in her decision-making on her family farm. She shared that regulations like this will drive consolidation and provide her and her family with fewer options to source and market their pigs while driving up the price of food for families. Trish, a farmer from Buchanan County in my district, shared the transition to Prop 12 housing would cost her family farm between $3 million and $4 million. Following the Supreme Court's decision, I introduced the EATS Act to push back on mandatory arbitrary mandates like California's Prop 12. The EATS Act preserves California's right to regulate its agricultural practices within its own borders, while also protecting Iowa's farmers' access to interstate commerce. So I think that any radical activists pushing an agenda like this that have never stepped foot on their family farms should come visit a farm in Iowa. I've extended an open invitation to them. We'd love to show you how our farmers care and manage their farms and the environment in the process. So I look forward to continuing to work with the committee to build consensus around a durable and bipartisan solution to protect our family farmers from damaging and arbitrary mandates like Prop 12. In closing, I'd like to thank the chairman and members of the committee for providing the opportunity to testify today. I think it's really important we bring a farm bill forward that improves and expands on the USDA's voluntary conservation programs, protects interstate commerce, strengthens our risk management tools, and again, expands access to new foreign markets. Congress can support American farmers in their work to feed and fuel the world. So thank you for letting me testify today, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Well, I thank the gentlelady for testifying and really being a great voice for those folks in Iowa, a great agriculture state that provide us with that both do production and processing. And as a grandfather with two grandsons that were born in Iowa, very familiar with the Iowa agriculture, and thank you for being here today. Now we're going to move from Iowa to Texas. Texas 16th Congressional District, Congresswoman Escobar, welcome, and yield to you for 5 minutes here. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm so grateful to you and Ranking Member Scott for hosting this Member Day hearing. I have the honor of representing the great community of El Paso, Texas, and I appreciate the opportunity to advocate for the needs of my community. I'd first like to say that this committee must continue to ensure families across this country have access to affordable, healthy, and nutritious foods that safeguard the well-being of Americans and focus on environmental sustainability that improves soil health and water quality for millions of farmers and ranchers. Also, it must adequately fund rural development programs that foster economic growth for communities across the country. As the committee continues to craft this legislation, I'd like to highlight a few of my priorities. First, I'd like to discuss my bill, H.R. 2740, establishing an Office of Colonia Affairs within the Department of Agriculture. As you know, colonias are majority Latino, unincorporated communities along the U.S.-Mexico border that often lack access to infrastructure that many of us take for granted. This includes water, wastewater, rural electrification, and other essential services. El Paso County alone has approximately 329 colonias with an estimated population of 90,582 people. Traditionally, there's been insufficient federal funding for colonias, and localities often have faced colonia issues all on their own, which can be very costly. By establishing an Office of Colonia Affairs within the Department of Agriculture, colonias will have the resources they need for technical assistance pertaining to federal programs and can be informed on what funding sources apply to their community. Second, I'd also like to highlight my bill, H.R. 2939, the PIGS Act, which expands the Animal Welfare Act by prohibiting specific methods of confining pregnant pigs that restrict their movement. My bill would increase the square footage requirement to at least 24 square feet, which allows pregnant pigs to lie down, stand up, and move about freely. Additionally, my bill establishes a program that provides $10 million a year to help pig farmers improve housing systems and comply with the prohibitions. My bill is an important step forward in holding the swine industry accountable by limiting the horrific conditions pregnant pigs are kept in. Third, I'd like to emphasize the need to expand access to nutritious and healthy foods for low-income and minority communities. Most recently, a new study conducted by the University of Texas at El Paso and El Pasoans Fighting Hunger concluded that 35% of El Pasoans and 61% of our university students are food insecure. We must strengthen the local food systems by expanding urban farming, investing in food security, and continuing to invest in food assistance programs like SNAP and WIC. It has been proven that programs like SNAP improve current and long-term health, improve nutritional outcomes, and lower healthcare costs. Also, it is of the utmost importance that the next Farm Bill ensures that nearly $20 billion provided in the Inflation Reduction Act for USDA conservation programs is used for its intended purpose. This funding is a win-win for farmers and for the planet. In 2023, USDA received requests for more than 3 times what the IRA made available for that year for climate-smart agriculture, meaning farmers want it, and the funding benefits all of us by helping to address the climate crisis. And finally, as I was sitting waiting to testify, I hear member after member talking about water. I want to remind the committee that industrial, large-scale factory farms are the biggest source of water pollution and water use in the USA, and we need to engage in some form of reform in that area. I will continue to work for and advocate for my community of El Paso and prioritize the needs of farmers, rural communities, and the well-being of animals. And I hope you consider these priorities as you continue to craft the 2023 Farm Bill. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Well, I thank the gentlelady. Now to please recognize the gentleman from Texas 25, Congressman Williams, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for the opportunity to speak today, and thank you to all the members of the Committee on Agriculture for the work you do to support our farmers and our ranchers. As a representative for Texas 25th District, I am honored to represent many farms and ranches, many of whom reach out to me regularly about the issues important to them. Today, I join you to discuss what we can agree on is an important problem facing not just the agricultural industry, but the entire country. Members of this committee and many Americans are likely familiar with plant-based imitation meats, such as chicken and ground beef, all of which appear impressively similar to traditional meat products, but are made with ingredients like soy and wheat. While plant-based products have grown in popularity over the last decade, there's been a concerning lack of oversight on the labeling of such products, causing confusion among consumers. To add to this confusion, earlier this year, the FDA and the USDA approved the sale of cell-cultivated chicken, better known as lab-grown poultry. While this process is still new and is time-intensive and expensive, Congress should learn from its lack of oversight on plant-based imitation meat products and consider forward-thinking protections for consumers from those who wish to manipulate them through misleading labeling. As chairman of the House Committee on Small Business and owner and operator of a car dealership and a calf cow operation in Texas for over 52 years, I understand the need to ensure that consumers are given all the information needed to make informed decisions while not interfering with the free market. We are a country of competition, of risk and reward, and the federal government should not be in the business of picking winners and picking losers. We must let competition drive innovation, allow individuals and businesses to choose the product that best suits their needs. There are extensive guidelines and regulations surrounding the labeling and marketing of traditional meat-based products by the FDA and the USDA. Through the requirement of accurate and honest labeling of imitation and lab-grown products, we create a level playing field and support a free market in the agricultural industry. I'm working diligently alongside your committee member, Congressman Alford, who also serves on the House Committee on Small Business, to ensure that as the imitation and lab-grown product industry grows, the American people and our ranching and farming communities are not taken advantage of. So, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and members of the esteemed Committee on Agriculture, thank you again for allowing me to join you today, and I look forward to working with each of you to support our farmers and our ranchers and tackling this important issue. In God we trust. I yield back.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your leadership of the Small Business Committee. The majority of our farms across this, well, not just our farms, are those who produce our food and fiber, building materials, energy resources, but those who process are small businesses. And I know the great work that you're doing to really be able to serve all small businesses, including those who provide within the agriculture space. So thank you for your leadership, and thanks for being a great voice for your constituents. My pleasure. Now pleased to recognize the gentlelady from Virginia, 4th Congressional District, Congresswoman McClellan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I thank you and Ranking Member Scott for holding this hearing this morning. I am here today to discuss my bipartisan bill with Representative Lawler, H.R. 6232, the Coordination for Soil Carbon Research and Monitoring Act. Soil carbon sequestration refers to land management practices that promote the absorption of carbon into the soil. These practices offer clear agricultural and environmental benefits, making operations more resilient to drought, heavy rainfall, and other severe weather conditions that are exacerbated by climate change. Experts estimate that soil could store almost 5 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide worldwide each year, which equates to preventing about 13% of global annual greenhouse gas emissions from entering the atmosphere. In Virginia, some farmers are already utilizing climate-smart land management practices, increasing their cropland productivity while protecting long-term conservation. However, increased federal coordination will allow more farmers and ranchers to quickly adopt these practices in their operations. Currently, soil carbon research and monitoring efforts across the federal government are fragmented and siloed. This leads to a lack of interagency communication that prevents us from fully understanding the gaps in research and monitoring technologies for soil carbon. Moving forward, a coordinated strategy to scale soil carbon sequestration should be developed to streamline these efforts. Our bill establishes an interagency committee on soil carbon research led by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. It directs the interagency committee to develop a cross-agency strategic plan for federal research, development, and deployment for soil carbon research, sampling, and measuring technologies. It also establishes working groups to coordinate soil carbon research priorities, including monitoring, reporting, and verification, data collection and management, fundamental research, and robust engagement with agricultural producers and communities. Finally, our bill requires regular reporting to Congress on soil carbon research and monitoring activities. I ask for your consideration of this common-sense bipartisan bill and look forward to working together to advance carbon sequestration efforts. Additionally, I want to urge the committee to ensure that the next Farm Bill uses the almost $20 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act for its intended purposes in USDA conservation programs. Soil carbon sequestration and other climate-smart agricultural practices are a clear win-win for our farming communities and our planet. I thank you for your time and consideration, and I yield back.
Well, I appreciate the gentlelady. Actually, just for the record, that $20 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act has already been reduced to $16 billion by the Congressional Budget Office based on sequestration and, quite frankly, the inability of the USDA to get that money out the door by the specified time frame that's there. So that's why we're talking about that. We want to see what we can preserve for investments in like conservation more beyond 2031, well into the future, 2050, if we do it the right way. Really appreciate your interest and your leadership on soil sequestration, healthy soils. I was pleased as a subcommittee chair, well, actually quite a number of years ago, to chair the very first Healthy Soils subcommittee hearing that we've had here. And today, And it is an incredibly important topic, and I appreciate your talking about it. We all need to talk about how the fact that the American farmer, rancher, forester are the carbon heroes. They sequester 6.1 gigatons of carbon annually, which is 10.1% more than what they emit. So providing those tools to be able to promote really what is American agriculture and what it has been. And it's not really new. What's new is we're actually talking about it now and giving them credit for what they do. So thank you for your leadership in that area. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, please recognize the gentleman from Washington's 6th Congressional District, Congressman Kilmer. Welcome to the Ag Committee, and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to talk about two bills, but before I do, I just want to echo those wishing you a full and speedy recovery. We're all praying for you, my friend. 49 years ago, I was born in a rural hospital in Port Angeles, Washington, and over the years, my family and I received high-quality, accessible care from providers at that hospital, providers who are from the community and who genuinely care about the place that they call home. But as you know, the future of healthcare in rural communities faces some extraordinary challenges, including rural hospital closures, workforce shortages, and increasing costs of care. Rural populations often bear the brunt of healthcare disparities. They usually skew older, have less income, and often have complex health issues. Under these combined pressures, more than 400 rural hospitals today are at risk of permanent closure. The rural-urban healthcare divide is a crisis that demands urgent attention from Congress, and that's why I was proud to introduce the Rural Hospital Technical Assistance Program Act, H.R. 4713, with my colleague from Texas, Representative Ronnie Jackson. This bipartisan legislation would codify an existing USDA program that provides targeted, specialized technical assistance to rural hospitals to help them strengthen essential health care, improve financial and operational performance, and ultimately keep the lights on and the doors open. The Rural Hospital Technical Assistance Program is critical in bridging the gap of healthcare disparities that we see every day, and I respectfully ask that this committee consider taking up that important legislation. I also asked the committee to consider the Reach Our Tribes Act, H.R. 5113, which is bipartisan and bicameral legislation to improve USDA programs for tribes. I have the great honor of representing 12 tribes who call my district home. The majority are in rural areas and benefit from USDA programs to build community facilities, to get internet access, to spur economic development. But too often, tribal communities haven't been able to take advantage of USDA resources due to a variety of factors, including the fact that these programs weren't designed with tribes in mind. They have burdensome application requirements and often just don't seem to reach Indian country. That's why I introduced the Reach Our Tribes Act with my colleague, Representative Nick Langworthy. Senators Mike Rounds and Maria Cantwell recently introduced companion legislation in the Senate. The Reach Our Tribes Act aims to enhance the efficacy of the USDA's economic and rural development programs for tribal entities by implementing some common sense, no-cost recommendations made by the Government Accountability Office. First, the bill would require USDA to establish a formal consultation process for annual budget requests and the Farm Bill. This move would promote collaboration and equity in decisions regarding budget allocations and reauthorizations. The bill would also require USDA to report on obligations made to tribal entities, addressing the current data gap and enhancing our understanding of program impacts, potential service gaps, and tribal utilization. The Reach Our Tribes Act also fosters interagency collaboration for economic development programs, seeking to streamline planning, application requirements, and stakeholder engagement across the USDA, HUD, and the Economic Development Administration. And finally, our bill calls for the establishment of a repository of federal economic development programs available to tribal entities, managed by the Department of Commerce's Office of Native American Business Development. This repository would offer a centralized and up-to-date source of information, facilitating tribal entities access to relevant programs. The Reach Our Tribes Act not only acknowledges the sovereign rights of tribal nations, but also equips us with the knowledge required to enhance service delivery and utilization for tribes. It's endorsed by the National Congress of American Indians and the Native Farm Bill Coalition. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time. I look forward to working with you and your committee on these two key priorities, the Rural Hospital Technical Assistance Program Act and the Reach Our Tribes Act. And I yield back.
Well, Congressman Kilmer, I know how important and what a strong voice you are for rural communities. I much appreciate you being here and testifying those priorities, bringing the priorities of your constituents before this committee. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Now, please recognize the gentleman from Oregon's 3rd Congressional District, Congressman Blumenauer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for making time for us to share our priorities and observations of this critical legislation. One of my agricultural priorities is reforming the federal crop insurance program to reduce wasteful spending and make the program work better for more farmers. On Monday, the GAO published a landmark report detailing how the program is failing taxpayers and producers alike. While I support a fair and well-targeted farm safety net to guarantee the security of our food system, most people would agree that giving millionaires hundreds of thousands of dollars in heavily subsidized crop insurance is neither fair nor well-targeted. Yet that's precisely what the GAO found. There are 1,341 producers making more than $900,000 a year in gross income who have 2/3 of their insurance premium paid for by the federal government. Millionaires do not need taxpayers to help them afford crop insurance, particularly when there's so many people who need to be able to take advantage of this. The numbers show this program is disproportionately skewed not towards small family farmers, but for the largest agribusiness. In fact, only 1 in 5 farmers can afford to participate in the program at all. Yet the rising federal price tag for crop insurance is not helping more producers access insurance. As proof of how consolidated the benefits of the programs are, GAO found that 1% of the policyholders receive 22% of the premium subsidies. The top 1% of policyholders got $464,000. This is far from risk management tool for small family farmers. In my state, 89% of the farmers receive no subsidies from the federal government. Small and mid-sized farmers around the state, the ones who actually grow the food, get very little help. For many smaller farmers and ranchers and nursery owners, especially those who grow the specialty crops, there is no suitable insurance product on the market. I hear this from the wine industry, the nursery industry. These people are shut out, and that's not fair. States like Oregon, which enjoy a diversified agricultural base, are shortchanged by the current crop insurance program. You have a very diverse agricultural base in your state, Mr. Chairman, and few people have access to crop insurance. Commodity crops accounted for 94% of crop insurance policies, whereas the whole farm revenue policies that service smaller, diversified farms, which we both represent, accounted for less than 1% of the policies sold. And that's only half the picture, because not only do taxpayers receive generously subsidized crop insurance program, they guarantee sky-high profits for private countries, many of them offshore, which administer the program. Free market advocates should be scandalized that the Department of Agriculture guarantees insurance providers a 16.8% market rate of return. You're concerned about having resources for farmers and ranchers far exceeding the 10% market-based return is a misallocation of these resources. And while the federal government is projected to spend $100 billion on crop insurance in the next decade, who is receiving these subsidies and how much they are receiving is a black box. We need more transparency, income limits, or payments caps. That's why I introduced the Assisting Family Farmers Through Insurance Reform to make common sense reform to the crop insurance programs so that it works better for more farmers, reduces wasteful federal spending, and protects the taxpayers. I'm proud of my work with Congressman Ralph Norman on the Crop Insurance Transparency Act to inject much-needed transparency into this crop insurance program. With a tight Farm Bill baseline, but multiple programs in need of more funding, the crop insurance program is a rare place to find easy savings, promote equity, and make overall health of our farm and ranching communities work better. I appreciate your time and courtesy in sharing this observation. I hope you will look here to be able to find resources that will help the other programs that are sorely in need of resources. And I appreciate your attention and your time.
Well, I thank the gentleman. Thanks for testifying today. Now please recognize the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Rosendale, for 5 minutes.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair, and greetings from Montana, where Chick-fil-A has made an entrance into the state, but beef still reigns king as the cattle outnumber the people by a 2-to-1 ratio. I introduced 5 bills that have been referred to your committee and would like to touch briefly on each of those today. First, I'll talk about H.R. 3755, the Industrial Hemp Act. This bill would cut red tape and streamline the regulatory framework for industrial hemp. Simply put, industrial hemp is different from cannabis and deserves different regulations. Industrial hemp does not need the same testing requirements. Inspectors and farmers can tell that it's different from recreational marijuana simply by looking at it. Current burdensome regulations prevent farmers across the country from capitalizing on this crop. It's estimated that industrial hemp has a potential global market worth as much as $15 trillion. Industrial hemp has a wide range of uses. It can be used as a cover crop, animal feed, biofuel, animal bedding, insulation, and much more. I've seen clothing made of it. It also has properties that make it more attractive to farmers. For example, it's actually advantageous for it to sit in the field and get damp, giving farmers more leeway in when their harvest time needs to be. My bill would keep the federal inspection guidelines for cannabis in place while cutting red tape for industrial hemp. This legislation is pivotal for empowering farmers and fostering a robust agricultural sector, eliminating red tape and creating job opportunities. By balancing regulation and freedom, it unlocks the potential of industrial hemp, benefiting both Montana farmers and the nation. Second, I introduced H.R. 6580, the Land and National Defense Act, the Land Act, to protect American farmland from our enemies. My bill would establish reciprocity by imposing the same restrictions on foreign citizens and companies purchasing land in the U.S. as Americans face in these respective countries. For example, Americans are not allowed to buy agricultural land in China. Under my bill, Chinese citizens and companies would not be allowed to purchase American land as long as those restrictions stay in place. I believe this is the best approach because it can stand up in the courts. Earlier this year, when Florida tried to ban China from buying land, they were immediately sued for discrimination. This approach doesn't have that same problem, but still effectively prevents our enemies from purchasing our land. Protecting our food supply chain is critical to our national security. Congress must act to stop China from purchasing our farmland, and I hope this committee will take a serious look at my bill. Third, I introduced H.R. 1604, the USA Beef Act. This bill is a bipartisan solution to protect American beef producers. The bill ensures that only beef that is born, raised, and slaughtered and packaged in the U.S. can be labeled as a product of the USA. The Big Four multinational meat packers routinely raise or slaughter cattle overseas and then package it in the United States and call it a product of this country. This undercuts our American ranchers, confuses consumers, and distorts the market. Unlike other beef packaging bills, my bill doesn't impose more labeling requirements, which could be burdensome for ranchers and meat processors. Instead, my bill restricts who can use the Made in America label, so it is an accurate identifier of American beef. By striking a balance between regulatory oversight and ranchers' freedom of choice, it empowers small American ranchers, promotes competition, and guarantees the authenticity of American beef. Fourth, H.R. 636, the Forest Litigation Reform Act, would address the endless litigation that blocks responsible forest management. Activist environmentalist groups to tie up forest management in our courts. This prevents states like Montana from effectively managing wildfires and our public lands. My bill would fix this by preventing taxpayer dollars from being used to finance these absurd claims. It would also streamline the litigation process by limiting injunctions or stays to 60 days pending appeal. My bill creates an alternative dispute process to resolve claims through arbitration instead of the tedious judicial process. I look forward to the Agricultural Committee considering this bill to protect responsible forest management practices from activists who abuse our courts. And lastly, Mr. Chair, I would like to touch on H.R. 200, the Forest Information Reform Act, or the FUR Act. I was glad to see my bill pass the House Natural Resources Committee, but still want it mentioned today. The bill is a compromise piece of legislation that would reverse the disastrous Cottonwood decision. The Cottonwood decision requires the United States Forest Service to repeatedly consult with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on ESA decisions, creating unnecessary delays in forest management. My bill would stop the perpetual cycle of litigation and promote forest and wildlife conservation. This legislation has bipartisan support and was passed by the Senate. I welcome any questions from my colleagues on the Agricultural Committee about this bill or anything else that I've testified on. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Well, Mr. Rosendale, thank you so much for your testimony and presenting those, bringing those ideas to the committee. Much appreciated. Thank you, sir. So thank you for your interest in that area. Now, please to recognize the gentlelady from Indiana, 5th Congressional District.
Right.
Yeah, Congresswoman Sparks. Please go ahead with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you having this hearing. And you know, we had a very vibrant debate in the floor, and I was a person who actually want us to have a serious conversation about Farm Bill, because Farm Bill, it's not just a farm bill. It's not about only agriculture. It's about a health of American people. It's about innovation. It's about, you know, the things that we can happen in agriculture, you know, to feed the world. We have wars right now where, you know, food is used as a weapon, and we have very aggressive countries to take advantage. And we, as you know, as Americans, can actually think about it, how we can increase production, how we can increase competition, because status quo is not working. Millions of people are hungry in the world. People are dying from hunger. Americans have a lot of health issues, so we have to look at this opportunity, you know, that actually think what we can do and maybe have a serious discussion. I was upset that we punted this issue of reauthorization of the Farm Bill till you know, the next fall, but I still hope, even though it's going to be an election time, maybe during the year this committee will think about it, what we can do, because we can talk about, you know, crop insurance and all these different things, which is great, but the challenge is for the smaller farmer, and I'm talking as actually working farmer, someone who drives combine. At least I used to do it more often. Now I don't have time to do real GDP, do a lot of talk here. But I think it's something that how we can have that a smaller farmer can survive, because the input costs and regulation are destructive for an American farmer. And we can talk about guaranteeing your revenue, but if your input cost is quadrupling or more in some of the areas, we have monopolies controlling a lot of parts of the markets, oligopolies. You know, you cannot survive. And I think we should take a serious conversation what we can do in the Farm Bill to increase competition and innovation, because ingenuity of our businesses and Americans will bring, you know, the best outcomes for all of us. And I think we have to look at that. We have to look at that. You know, we have unreasonable regulation created by government and USDA, you know, related to Waters of USA. I'm sure it was discussed here. Or the farmer, you know, we have a standard like, you know, that the USDA can say, well, here was wetlands maybe 20 years ago on this map, and you need to prove that you actually didn't violate the law. Like, you have to prove that you're innocent by the farmer without even being, like, known that you could ever be guilty because you never had these wetlands on the map. It's ridiculous. We have EPA standards on the combine. That's a fire hazard that we apply to big trucks, but they shouldn't be applying the same for emissions, because, you know, this is a national security issue. If that combine stop, you know, and you have a very limited amount of time, then you can harvest your crops. We need to think about that. We had right to repair where big monopolies, you know, that actually now try to, you know, control the markets of equipment. And I think, you know, John Deere had like a memorandum of understanding, but that just doesn't work. We need to put it in the law. We cannot be abusive, where a lot of manufacturers of equipment try to preclude, you know, for you to maintain your equipment. And sometimes, you know, it's the time, it's, you know, it's the essence significantly. So we probably should put it in the law, you know, where you should be able, you know, to not, you know, when you buy a combine, you shouldn't pay to maintain for life, you know, to the producer. You know, we have to look at that. You know, I think we have a Prime Act, Representative Massey has, where we actually even regulating where beef is sold within the state. I mean, that shouldn't be even even, the government's business, because the smaller producers of, cattle producers, they actually should be able to, to sell more to consumer using the state regulations. And state will do much better job being closer to the people. And we have to be much smarter in doing that. There are a lot of things that we are having in regulatory environment that actually benefit the larger monopolies. And now we have only, pretty much most of the markets on meat packing controlled by 4 meat packers and, 1 from China, 2 from Brazil. And ultimately, they care about their own interests. And countries like China don't particularly care about American consumer, I'll be honest with you, but we have to. And we need to think about it. So I just really hope, as part of this time now that we have, the committee will think about it, how we can bring innovation, how we can look at our supplemental programs that we have, that actually, bring, healthy food to the people, that we actually go into American healthy, even if we have to, and get them out of poverty and help people to have a healthy, productive life. So I would appreciate this discussion. We'll introduce some bills since we cannot do amendments now, but I hope committee will actually have a serious discussion, and I yield back.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for your passion, for your interest in obviously the number one industry in Indiana, which is agriculture, both production and processing. And American agriculture really has, I think, one suitable definition, and that is it is science, technology, and innovation. And it's not a static industry. It is ever dynamic, and we're working hard to be able to to make sure that that's reflective in this farm bill. Certainly greater competition is a part of that, because greater competition, I think, helps to foster all 3 of those characteristics. So, but once again, thank you for your testimony before the committee here today. Much appreciated. I think that, looking over the room, I think we pretty much have concluded, which is really good. We had 19 members testifying. I've testified before some other committees in the past, and sometimes I was the only one. Not too often, but on occasion to have 19 is excellent. But we're not limited to that. I want to certainly thank all of my members, my colleagues, for testifying today, for their passion on this, for agriculture, for bringing their perspectives, different perspectives to the committee. Obviously, the goals for this farm bill have remained the same as what they were when I started out as ranking member 2 years and 11 months ago, and that is that we do this farm bill that is bipartisan, bicameral, and highly effective. And the highly effective part is incredibly important. I think the roadmap or the recipe for highly effective is very clear. We've been on that path, on that trail for now almost 3 years, and that is listening to voices outside the Beltway of Washington. And that's what you heard today, as we had members of Congress that came here to be the voice for before their constituents, and to bring their views forward. Add that to the public portal, where we've had more than 3,000 contributions and ideas that have entered in this process. 171 members that have weighed in on the portal, over 1,500. The amount of information is a little overwhelming, but we've got a great team that has been working hard at that and doing a great job. More than 80 listening sessions around the country, somewhere around 37 states plus 1 territory. 80 altogether, in the public hearings that we've had here, like the one we've had today with our members, all important to our eventual successful and timely reauthorization of the Farm Bill. So we're going to stay on that path to success when it comes to America's #1 industry, and all those hardworking families to provide us food, fiber, building materials, energy resources, rural economic development, connectivity, all the great things that quite frankly this Farm Bill will support. So much appreciation. So under the rules of the committee, the record of today's hearing will remain open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from any member who testified or offered written testimony today. This hearing of the Committee on Agriculture is adjourned.
Sure.